I built this Catan Map Generator in Lovable after failing to build it in Replit, in Firebase Studio, and even in Lovable the first time I did it. I did two things differently, and that let me get this beautiful map generator that I've not seen. I've seen other Catan map generators, but not one that does this, which had some specific things that I wanted to do. Exactly what I wanted in terms of requirements, and now I have a Catan map generator. If you've been struggling to vibe code, you absolutely have to watch this video, and I'm going to explain two things you can do that will get you beautiful apps like this. Hi, I'm Jason. I'm a dad of two, 45-year-old dad of two, building an app a week. Now, firstly, I just want to say why is my motivation for building this is that there are lots of Catan map generators online, but they didn't have these sorts of constraints like the number of 6 to 8 token limits on resources. And we like to say, okay, well, we want one on wood, or I think exactly one on wood, we say, and exactly one on brick, and then maybe some, and maybe exactly one on wheat, and we sort of leave the rest of it. And then you just sort of get a unique map. Oh, and we also don't like identical tiles are touching. And we get sort of a map that we like, and we can play around with it. Now, I just couldn't find something that did that online. Maybe you'll let me know if there is. So I tried. I tried, and I went with him with a prompt, and you'll see that the prompt isn't very good, and that's a hint. But you don't have to be very good at writing prompts. The method I'm going to give you will give you a good prompt without you having to be good at writing it. Again, sort of a poor prompt. I guess I'm describing what I want, but it's just not enough. You can see here that there's no board. You click generate board, it doesn't work. Here it doesn't work either. And then finally on a Lovable one, you are getting a board, but it just looks nonsense. So, what did I do differently? Well, I went into ChatGPT with this prompt, which I've developed, and I'll find a way of getting it to you if you're interested. I'll either copy it into the YouTube video below, or I'll include a link if it doesn't fit. But effectively, there's this whole prompt that you can have, and then you just add your idea, the sort of similar idea that I was adding to the vibe coding apps. I was adding it. You just write it here below. Now the difference is, of course, it's still the same input, but the difference is, very big difference here, is that you in the prompt you're telling ChatGPT to say the user ID is incomplete. Do not deliver a spec. Instead, ask one clear, direct question to fill the gap. Repeat until you have all the details. Then produce the spec in full. That's a really important part of the prompt, and just generally when you're dealing with ChatGPT, telling it to ask you questions is a really good method. What this does is it means if it doesn't understand something, it'll ask you questions. There's another part to this, which is don't just answer ChatGPT's questions. Look at what it's saying and correct it if it's wrong. Here, it was wrong about sort of how many number tokens they are in Catan, so I corrected it, and that is it's just you need to understand what you're asking, and you need to understand the material, and if not, you need to Google it and make sure you know what you're doing here, or just think it through, because this is the sort of thing that obviously, if ChatGPT is getting it wrong, could also be that Lovable's getting it wrong. By the way, I was running this in the O3 model. I mentioned that because the O3 model is absolutely the best for reasoning, and I believe in producing this sort of thing. It's my opinion anyway. So just think about the model, and I would recommend using O3, or at least O4 mini high, if not O3. I think you'll get a better result this way. So I explained to ChatGPT what it got wrong and answer its question. It then has another question. I answer that. All good. Produces something. And this is the important thing. I read through this. Okay. I read through it, and there was something I didn't like. So I wanted it to be more specific. And this goes to, it's assuming knowledge of Catan, but maybe Lovable doesn't have that knowledge. I don't know. I just want to be really clear and really specific and lay out everything in here. Okay, so it did that. Unfortunately, when it did that, what it then did is it removed a bit that I actually liked. So what I did here is, and this is a really good way of doing it, is I switched to canvas mode. Now, canvas mode, the advantage of canvas mode, not sure why it's, okay. The advantage of canvas mode is that you can then chat with it and it will edit the document rather than producing a new document each time. So you can target specific sections and say, I want to change that section. It's not going to regenerate the whole document and maybe change the bits you like. So what I could then do is I could have a little chat with it, go back and forth on the details. And there was a point where I wasn't sure about something. And you said, I don't want to change, but I want to understand. Because I wanted to understand this document really well. And so there's just this question of just spending that time. You don't need to be technical. You don't need to know what you're doing. What you need to do is you need to really understand what ChatGPT is doing. And if you don't understand it, just keep asking it questions until you do understand. It gave me a good explanation. I realized it had gone down a road I actually didn't like. So I actually did get it to then rewrite it. But before I got it to rewrite it, I sort of asked, okay, well, what does that mean? How's that going to affect things? And then it rewrote it. And I read through this and I was really happy with the result. Now, actually, one thing, maybe I didn't need to do this because I said don't assume a React framework. It turns out Lovable used a React framework, so maybe ChatGPT knew something I didn't there, and that's okay. But it's also okay to have it written in a language neutral style, which actually is a bit easier for me to understand because I don't know React, so I don't know when it's talking about some things implying it's using React. I didn't quite understand them. This was then easier for me to understand, and it had everything I wanted. So I think I'm really happy that I made those changes. It's got real level of functionality, and it sort of really got into some of the details. And there was stuff that I amended to make sure it worked. I just really thought it through. And if you have any doubts, as I say, chat with it. This is the first thing you need to do, and the first thing that I was getting wrong before. And absolutely, if you want to get a good result from vibe coding, this is really worth it. And you don't need to be afraid of it. You don't need to write this document. It's a big, long document. You know, if I had to sit and write it out, I don't know. I'd be put off. I'd probably delay doing it or procrastinate because it's just so much. I don't need to write it though. ChatGPT will do it. I need to read it and I need to understand it, and I need to make sure I'm happy with it and own it. It's my document. It's produced by ChatGPT. It's my document. Just as if I was managing a team and I said to part one of the team, give me a document or a spec, and I need to give that to the developer, I would then be making sure I'm happy with it and going back to the team member. And if I'm not happy, I'd be really clear. And I'd ask for changes because it's my document, my product. Exactly the same thing here, no different. So what's next? So next we paste this into Lovable, and it works really well, and we get a really good result. But there's a problem. Effectively, the ports are broken. Now, and this is the second thing you need to think about when you're vibe coding. It worked out. Lovable did a beautiful job. Really well, but I had to go back and forth quite a bit on the ports and I couldn't get it to work. In the end, with Lovable's help, I worked out what section of the code I needed to look at. If I got it open, and that's here, this section, and I just effectively needed to play around with these numbers because they're sort of coordinate system. And if I could play around with these numbers, I'd be able to get, let's see if I can zoom in. I can't. If I could play around with these numbers here, I would be able to get the ports into the right place. But the problem is Lovable is read-only on the free plan, and I wasn't quite ready to pay for the plan. Maybe I should be. It's a good product, but I want to, as I'm doing an app a week, I want to try some different products. I'm not really willing to pay for everything. There is a way around it though. Lovable has a link to GitHub, and you can push all the code into GitHub. Now, once you've pushed that code into GitHub, Lovable then gives some instructions about how you can download that code onto your computer. And obviously, once it's on your computer, you can edit it. You can push it back to GitHub when you're finished and push it back to Lovable and then edit it in Lovable or chat with Lovable again. So that's all great. And I think that's a really good solution. There was a problem and you will find, just bear in mind, not everything works. I got an error log when I got errors, when I tried to follow Lovable's instructions. Something went wrong. So all I did was I just copy and pasted my error log into ChatGPT. This time I was using No4 Mini High. You could use O3 as well. Sometimes there's query limits. I don't want to burn it all on something that should be fairly easy. And ChatGPT tell me what I needed to do to fix it. So again, just don't be afraid of stuff. When I had done some stuff like this a few years ago, and it was so much harder. You had to Google everything. Now you don't need to do all of that. Just paste it into ChatGPT and do that. Then it didn't quite work what ChatGPT said, and it gave me some more recommendations. And then I didn't quite understand something. Again, not a problem. It's a point I didn't get. Just asked ChatGPT, what do you mean by that? What's going on there? And so it just explained in a bit more detail, gave me everything I needed to get it working. Absolutely ideal, brilliant. There was one other thing. There was just some code that wasn't quite doing, some CSS code that wasn't quite doing what I wanted. It wasn't quite wrapping in the way that I liked. It looked slightly ugly in sort of one type of configuration, one type of size. And so I just went to ChatGPT and asked what it meant, and it explained to me what the CSS code there was. So to be clear, actually, I should just maybe explain that. The way I got to that code, you can see here, it sort of looks a bit ugly. The reset button is coming out into here. We don't really want that. So the way I got there is I went to inspect, and then I found it. So, okay, so it's showing me the code here. So you can always find the code and what's going on in the HTML. So that's showing me the styles. You can. Okay. So I just pulled this a bit to the left to get it to work. In fact, what I realized was I actually think I went back to Lovable to ask it about this. So I said, where's that code? And I went and found it. This is obviously adding some sort of data things to it, which is not the code I posted into ChatGPT. So you can inspect, and that will show you sort of the HTML that's coming through, or you can go to Lovable and say, well, where's the code for that element? So after I finished recording, I remembered that how I'd actually got to the text. So as you know, I downloaded the files onto my computer, and I was using a code editor at the time, Atom, but any decent code editor would do this, and effectively most code editors should have something like this, a find in project. But you don't want to just find in a particular file, you want to find in a project. And I searched for reset, or you can search for anything. And it sort of gave me some different things. So here there were some settings on reset. Here was about the whole model of reset. Here we can see we've got on-click, reset, and then we got reset. So this clearly looks to be where there's a button, where you've got that sort of on-click function. So if we go here, we can see this then takes us to where all the buttons are. And we have this div, which is actually the key, because this div is setting the pattern for the grid. And then we got sort of the buttons that go within it. So you could just sort of copy all of this text. You see in a minute what I'm talking about. You could copy all of it, or you could just copy this bit and just look at this bit. But either way, you should be able to get to the text and get it into ChatGPT, and it should be able to help you. And I pasted that in, and I sort of went and asked ChatGPT, how can you help me with that? How can you fix it so it doesn't do this issue? And it came up with some ideas. And actually some of the stuff I didn't like, and then it came up with like a really quick alternative that it sort of said, oh, that might not work. Well, I thought I'd try it. And you know what? It worked beautifully. So the result is an app that works. I need to fix that actually. It's got two titles. Very easy to fix. It's an app that works. It looks really nice. I'm going to push it back to Lovable and then see if I can publish it on Lovable, which would be really nice. But it's exactly what I wanted. We see this map. It generates it. I can adjust the settings, and it just does everything I want. So that's ideal. And all I needed was two things. One was I needed a good spec, which I got with ChatGPT and just took the time with ChatGPT to get it right. And two, I just need a little bit of willingness to look at the code and edit it on my computer without actually maybe writing new code, just literally editing it, just going in, asking ChatGPT what I didn't understand, playing around with it until I got it working. And it's so simple. One thing is, once it's running on the local computer, you can actually edit it live. So you edit the code, you save the file, and it changes it around. That's what it was doing for me anyway. So I could just move the ports. So I was just doing, okay, 2.5 doesn't work, does 3 work? No, 3 is too much, 2.7, that sort of thing. And it worked fantastically. And I ended up here. So with those two methods. Anyone can vibe code, and anyone can vibe code successfully and produce beautiful apps like this.